So my parents, they're struggling right now, and I'm always going to be paying for them. However, I'm starting to switch my tune up because it's seeming that they're just taking advantage of me, and the reason I say that is because they're always enabling my brother. So you know what I say to them? I make an ultimatum. I say, you know what? If you're going to enable my brother, have him move in here even though he doesn't have a job, he can't hold a job down to save his life, I'm not going to pay your mortgage anymore unless you do one thing. Put my name on the mortgage so I'm the owner, since I'm the one paying it anyways. I'll still let everyone live there, rent-free. I just need something out of this. Well, you know what my parents decide to tell me? Let me show you. My mother is what most people would call a boy mom. The worst day of her life was the day my brother moved out for college, tied with the day that he announced he was engaged. She had loads of fun making herself the center of attention at his wedding. I'm talking full-on wedding gown disguised as a mother of the groom dress. Yeah. But then, he did not move back in with his wife to make her multi-generational household dreams come true, and she was sent back to sulking. Now, I'm not saying that she's actually doing anything to make him lose his job, but she's definitely been manifesting a reunion with her darling baby boy for years now. The fact that he's flat broke and has nowhere else to go is just semantics, really. That brings us to the reason I'm making this post. I'll be using fake names in addition to this being a throwaway account, simply because I'm not taking the chance of anyone coming across this and connecting it back to me. I've seen those AI voiceovers on TikTok. I know how many views those can get. Use this in whatever video you want, just don't try to track me down or dox me, okay? So, after a few weeks, my brother Greg lost his job. He lives in Arizona, which is a full day's drive if you don't stop for anything and don't sleep for 24 hours straight, so it's been a while since we've seen him. Naturally, our mother pounced at the opportunity to get him to move back in with her and have him under the same roof as her for the first time in more than a decade. I can't even imagine he actually wants all that, but I don't think that he has much of a choice. His wife, Skylar, doesn't work, which I suspect is because my brother is one of those men who provide and women stay at home kind of guys. And mom and dad can't really afford to bankroll him living in another state, especially since neither of them work either. See, legit, right after Greg went and got married and decided to just stay in Arizona, Dad decided that it was a time for him to retire. Since my brother and I are both grown up and I refused to get married, it was just time for me to, quote, step up as a daughter should and look after your parents. I was like 22, pretty much fresh out of college, but I had good enough job. And my childhood home is like a 10-minute drive from work. So I figured, why not? My brother wasn't around for me to have to live up to it anyways. Plus, they're strongly implying that I'd get the house in a few years since my mom wanted me to move to Arizona to be closer to Greg once he gave her grandchildren. Clearly, that did not work out, since in the last 5 years, not only has Greg not popped out any grandbabies with Skylar, but he really only calls like once a month max. The last time I saw him was 2 Thanksgivings ago, when he flew back home for once instead of mom and dad going down to him. And he spent the whole weekend complaining about his job, their house, how much he hated work, and pretty much everything else that he could think of to go on about. Safe to say, Greg and I do not get along. He's 4 years older than me, so I was only subjected to 14 years of him before he left for college. But pretty much every day before that was just me training to be his perfect little person. Whatever Greg said goes. I did not share any of his toys. I did not pick up what movie we got to watch. I did not pick what we had for dinner. He got presents for every single one of my birthdays, so he, quote, would not feel left out. The list just goes on and on. I was absolutely an accident child, and it was very clear to me that I would never ever come before Greg. Yeah, things got better after he left. I think Mother was just so bored without him around that she turned all her attention towards me when she wasn't trying to drown him in the phone calls and emails. It was a little suffocating, and the comparisons did not die out completely. But I was the center of attention for the first time in my whole life. So sue me for making the most of it. I stayed close to home for school. Shout out to any UW alums lurking. And I got a pretty sweet gig in the city as a software engineer right after graduating, working for a fellow Husky. My mom actually threw a graduation party for me, which was swiftly overshadowed by Greg announcing his engagement. But still, the next year he got married and Dad retired. It's been 5 years apiece ever since he did, and he's too busy with his life down in Arizona to bother me too much with his opinions on women, working outside of the home, and now I need to be more of a lady and get married already. I don't know if he realizes that the fact that I haven't is the only reason he doesn't have to worry about Mom and Dad, since I'm able to look after them as a direct result of my unladylike choices. The only thing I've really had to deal with is my mother's super frequent breakdowns about her son living so far away, or the fact that he hasn't even given her any grandchildren, or the fact Skylar must be convincing him to stay away, which she isn't, I don't think. She's actually a decent person and seems to actually like my family for whatever reason. Now, with Greg being recently unemployed and Skylar being a stay-at-home wife without any work experience to her name, they don't have any money. Despite Phoenix being cheaper than Seattle, they really won't be able to afford to stick around there for much longer without any income. And since Greg's been striking out on the job hunt, my mom very strongly suggested that they move back home. I think Skylar's the one who pushed him to accept, actually. Greg might be a self-centered jerk who thinks he's owed the world on a silver platter, but even he can't stand Mom smothering for too long without feeling suffocated. Still, he didn't have any better offers, though considering how much he hated his job, I don't think he really looked all that hard for other offers, if I'm being honest. Important side note. About 4 years ago, after a solid year of leaving Greg's bedroom, untouched like some sort of golden child shrine after he got married and did not move back in. So, almost 9 years altogether, my dad converted the room into a private yoga studio for my mom, who religiously does yoga. Of course, he did not anticipate the meltdown about him just tearing down her precious Greg shrine, but she did get over it enough to eventually start using the space. It's actually one of the things we were able to bond over after Greg had left. I was a cheerleader, and yoga kept me bendy all through high school, so I was happy to pick it back up with her at home. Here's the thing, though. A yoga studio means one less bedroom. While that's all well and good when it's just my parents and I here, Greg and Skylar moving in makes it a bit of a challenge. I mean, why'd they come down for Thanksgiving that one time? I'd been relegated to the couch for the duration of the stay. One weekend on the couch is fine. Their moving in, though long-term, meant a more permanent solution would be needed. When my parents asked me to talk about Greg moving back in, I was seriously just expecting them to ask me to pay for the yoga studio in the basement, to be turned back into the bedroom, maybe a little more tricked out as a little granny suit. So Greg and Skylar had their own space for real. I've been paying rent ever since I took over as the breadwinner, and only employed member of the family, I should say, to cover all the bills and give my parents some spending money, but renovating the basement would definitely cost more than they could cover with that. If that was exactly what they asked me to do, I would have done it. That wasn't what they asked for, though, and my mom made it very clear quickly that since we didn't have enough space, they thought the best thing for me to do was move out. Since I was getting older, it was time for me to leave the house and meet a good man, and with Greg and Skylar around, it would get too crowded, especially if they started having children, which my mom was really hoping that they would. Here's the thing. They didn't just want me to move out, they wanted me to keep paying rent. You know, for everything, since Greg did not have a job and would probably take some time to find one. And even after he did, I should uphold my duty as their daughter and want to keep supporting them since Greg would be having his own children to support soon if my mom got her way. They want me to leave the house so that Greg can move in. They want me to keep paying for everything anyways while he gets to freeload on my money. that I get to look for a new place to live, and I'm not going to get into everything I'm feeling right now, other than saying I'm beyond hurt and angry as hell. I think my dad could tell I was going to explode because he told me to take some time, just to think about it, and ushered my mom away very quickly. I've taken a day so far. I've done nothing but think about the fact that my parents, after all this time, are still willing to put my brother first. I've spent years of my life supporting them, all the while he's been gallivanting to the other side of the country, not even bothering to return their call. How do I even react to this? Refuse and have them hate me forever, or leave and hate myself? Update number 1. Okay. Wow. I was not expecting my post to get any real attention, but apparently there's more people out there with dysfunctional families than I thought. A lot of you have left comments and sent me DMs, so before I get into my update, which is a big update in my opinion, I'll address some of those. This might be a little sappy, thank you for taking the time to leave a comment. Other than the people who told me that women have no place in the workplace, and every single creep in the Pacific Northwest who converged on my DMs like a swarm of vultures. I do appreciate those of you who gave me some real sane advice. I actually decided to listen to it. So, I always knew that my mom liked Greg better. I just always knew that he was her perfect little golden boy, while I was just sort of there. But things have been good since he'd moved out. I was 14 when he left, and it's been 13 years. I've lived almost as long without him as I'd with him. But even once he was 3 states away, I was still living in his shadow. Part of me has always known, and gosh, he knows I've had my share of friends and boyfriends tell me so, but I wanted to badly believe that my parents, my mom especially, could see me as good enough that I overlooked it. I couldn't do that anymore. Not with that favoritism being thrown right into my face after half a decade of supporting them single-handedly. They wanted me to move out, so I did. I got an apartment that's within walking distance of my work, which has actually been amazing for my fresh air and vitamin D. It was fully furnished and I moved in immediately. I thought that I'd have to go through a great pain to keep the address from my parents, but they didn't even bother. It hurt, but it gave me the push to see my plan through. You know, the night that I moved the last of my stuff out of that house, along with my very important documents, including my birth certificates and social security. Anyways, thank you, comment section, for telling me to do that at the stroke of midnight, because I'm a drama queen at heart. I blocked my parents and brother on every single platform I could think of, even LinkedIn, which I had not known was possible until then. You know, Greg isn't even in Washington yet, so it might have been a little early, but I felt like it would put it off for even a little while. I'd get complacent and let myself keep living his shadow. I needed to get out while I could, while the sting of my parents' favoritism was the most painful. It sucked, yeah, and some days it still sucks, but it's getting better. It'll be a week tomorrow, and it's honestly been good for me. Aside from walking to work in the morning, I've also just been feeling a sense of peace that I never knew I was missing. I can't lounge around the house without being afraid that my mother's going to insult my posture or just tear into me for leaving a mug on the table. Maybe it hasn't been long enough to say definitely, but I think things are actually going well. Update number 2. Alright, so I spoke too soon. Maybe I jinxed it, like way too many of you said seriously. Guys, this is superstitious as hell of a place where neckbeards come here to congregate. Yeah, that's right. And insult anyone who is so much as knowing their rising sign. I digress. Do you want to know something that I just found out via a 2-hour phone call that I'm pretty sure blew out my right eardrum? Apparently, Greg lost his job months ago. Not weeks ago like I'd been told. No, he lost his job near the beginning of the year. Now, Arizona might not be the most expensive place in the country per se, but it sure as hell is not the cheapest. So you might be wondering how on earth Greg and Skylar have been living there for months without any income at all. I was sure, and so we come upon fun fact number 2. My parents took out a second mortgage on the house to give money to Greg. I've been paying their mortgage ever since, and here I was, thinking I was being an amazing daughter by giving them more money every month after my promotion. And they'd gone and remortgaged the house that they claimed that they would be leaving to me, and given all the money to the guy who had hightailed it out of the state after high school. Do you know what happens when you miss your mortgage payment? The bank, they take your home. Foreclosure, that's a real thing. One that my parents failed to consider until they started burning through their meager savings. Whatever they had not spent on or sent to dear Greg that I'd given them over the years, and realized that they would not be able to make the mortgage payments. Greg and Skylar have already moved in, but they're definitely not going to be able to help, so there's now 4 people living inside of that house, all unemployed and only a month of mortgage money left. As she does, my mom called my Aunt Jasmine to complain. She's technically my great aunt, but she's like 63, which is barely older than my mom, and she's the only family we've got who still lives here in Washington. My mom kind of hates her. Aunt Jasmine's an actual hoarder and sticks her nose in everyone's business. And Mom's a clean freak who also sticks and loves butting into people's business. So it's a match made in both heaven and hell. Really, they still talk all the time though, since again she's really the only family we've got here. And Aunt Jasmine's really big on a family sticks together. Aunt Jasmine, hearing that, quote, I'd abandon my family, decided to call me up and tear me a new one. In her words, I left them on the cusp of homelessness and without a penny to rub together. That's how I found out about the whole mortgage thing, by the way, and how they can't afford it without me. That is the way that she sees it. The only thing for me to do is give them as much money as they need and hope they can find it in themselves to forgive me. The way I see it, they can eat dirt. Well, mostly the other half of me is ridden with guilt and slowly driving me insane. Hence my return to these interwebs after 2 months of peace. Hopefully reading enough comments telling me to cut them off will give them the nerve to actually stick with it. Update number 3. Hey guys. Well, you guys are either going to upvote me or, to the heavens, or tear me into a new one in the comment section below, but hear me out before you comment anything, alright? I'll leave a little bit of information for those of you who are typing anyways. I paid my parents a visit. I may not have appreciated being yelled at by Aunt Jasmine for 2 hours straight, but the part of me that was twisting with guilt was seriously impacting the stress-free environment that I've begun to build for myself, so I decided to do something about it. However, you'll be happy to hear that I've gained some self-respect since I last saw my parents, and maybe it was the distance, maybe it was the fact that they had not bothered to contact me before they realized that they were running out of money. And the only thing they did notice, I'd blocked them. But I wasn't really going to let them walk all over me the second Greg reared his ugly head up anymore. Especially if I was going to be saving their skin and keeping them off the street. Doing so did mean coming face to face with my brother for the first time in 2 years. And this time he was not sloshed on Thanksgiving-themed cocktails. Sober Greg is about as fun as you would imagine. Skylar, she was fine, like she always is. I still don't know why she married him, but it doesn't really matter. I wasn't there to dissect their marriage. I was there to buy a home. I think I mentioned in my original post, I really can't be bothered to go back and check. So if I didn't, oh well. But my parents are very strongly implying that since Greg had moved out, I'd be getting the house once he had kids since our mother wanted to be closer to her grandbabies. Some of you will call me an idiot for not getting it in writing, but it was good enough for me at the time. It was not good enough anymore, though. I went to my parents' house not with the intention of simply paying their mortgage and letting them play house with their golden child. They could still do that for all I cared, but I wanted the house title in return. I'd already been paying the mortgage anyways, and I would continue to do so, but not for nothing. I could certainly, afford it, They definitely couldn't. I had one addition of the condition to it. Greg would have to pay his and Skylar's bills once he gets a job. Nothing extreme, nowhere near the amount I'd be paying in rent, just enough to cover his share of the utilities and such. I would continue covering all our parents' expenses. I actually think they seemed open to the idea until Greg started yelling about me trying to, quote, steal his inheritance, and being a conniving little female dog, and other more creative insults that I might have actually found funny out of context. He went on long enough to send Skylar running out of the room close to tears, and then turned to our parents and straight up told them that they would not be accepting my offer. If you think that they disagreed even for a second, I have not done a good enough job explaining just how under this thumb that they are. So yeah, I'll not be getting the house, sucks for sure, but I don't think they're going to be getting the house for much longer either. I'm pretty sure the period for non-payment is like 4 months before the bank starts the process of taking your home. They're either going to give me a call then, or they're going to lose the house. For my own mental health, I don't care either way. Update number 4. Wow, it's been 4 months since my last update, so you might want to go and have a bit of a refresher. But a quick little info. After my brother Greg convinced our parents that they actually should, not take my very generous deal, if I do say so myself, to buy over the house and let them live in it while Greg just covers his and Skylar's bill, I decided to just leave them to their own device for a bit. I was serious when I said I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. Plus, I mostly figured that my parents didn't really have another option. Aunt Jasmine might shout herself hoarse about supporting family, but she can't really afford to pay for the mortgage on top of her own disaster of home. Short of taking them in, which I'm sure Mom would never willingly just agree to, there wasn't anything she could do. Sooner than expected, I get a call. The only surprising part was the fact that it was not my mom calling me, it was Skylar. The poor thing could barely get any words, and, well, she was clearly in the throes of a panic attack when she called, so it took a while to calm her down enough for some semblance of coherence. She'd had a huge blowout fight with my brother, who was still not willing to budge. After they got a letter from the bank and she knew that my offer was their best bet to not be homeless, she did not have a job. She went to college, but she never worked a day in her life because Greg just never wanted her to. And her parents had disapproved so much that she had not spoken to them in years. She'd been searching for a job ever since Greg lost his, but when she found out, he freaked out on her, and now she did not have a chance. She begged me to go through with my offer to buy over the house and have them pay their bills, even if Greg refused, and I decided to try. I figured if I, had nothing to lose. Best case, I get a house out of this. Worse, I wash my hands of the whole thing and move on with my life. It would stink a little, but I'd get over it, so I went back home and I offered to buy over the house again. Only this time the deal was a little different. I still wanted the house, that did not change. In return for continuing to pay the mortgage and allowing my parents to continue living there, I wanted the deed to the house and the title to be in my name. However, Greg would have to do more than pay his share of the bills. Why should he get away with only a few $100s a month? After all the grief that he's given me for trying to help him, I wasn't going to make myself a martyr. This time, I wanted him to match the same amount of rent that I've been paying since I was 22. Would that cover the entire mortgage? Sure, but I'd still be covering the extra bills and all our parents' additional expenses, and I did not think it was unfair at all. I mean, come on. He did not share that opinion, but evidently the letter from the bank warning them about the missing any more payments had made my parents desperate enough to agree anyways. So to make a long story short, I'm now the proud owner of a beautiful Seattle townhouse. Actually, I think I'm a landlord officially, since I'm still expecting that rent payment. I told Greg that he has a month to pony up the money, or I'm going to send him packing. I don't care if he goes or where he goes. Skylar's welcome to stay though if she wants to. She might have married him, but I'm not gonna make her homeless just to prove a point. He can be homeless on his own if that's what he wants. Place your bets on whether you think I'll actually pay. I might reply once I find out, but I'm not really planning to update this again. Updates number 5. The month ended. Yes, I know it's been like 3 months, but I've been busy, okay? And as many of you predicted, Greg did not pay the rent. I feel like he probably expected me to just quietly roll over like an obedient little sister and not say a word about it. But that is not who I am. I'm done playing second fiddle to whatever he wants. I made good on my promise that I evicted him. At least I started the process officially, and my parents immediately tried to fight me on it. Evidently, they had also expected me to just let Greg get away with whatever he wanted now that I had the house title. But they were wrong. I meant it when I said I was done. If they wanted to protect him, they could go with him. They would not be doing anything in my house. I started the process to evict them too. Before the whole thing could actually go through, they realized I was being serious and packed up their stuff and ran off to Aunt Jasmine's house. She might be a hoarder, but she's dead-set traditionalist who thinks family should always come first. So even if she and my mother can't be in the same room for more than an hour without wanting to tear each other's heads off, she took them in. Mom's completely a neat freak, so I'm sure she's having a great time in that home of a woman who spent the last 60 years refusing to throw away anything. Dad got a job at a body shop nearby to keep them afloat, which doesn't pay anywhere near as much as he used to make as a mechanic back in the day, but enough to keep the lights on with Aunt Jasmine having 3 new mouths to feed. So obviously, Greg went with them, Skylar did not, and she kept pushing and pushing for him to actually pay their rent the last month here. He refused. They got into so many screaming matches about it that the neighbors actually called me to ask if everything was okay. She left the day I served him the eviction notice. Her parents hated Greg and her decision to marry him, so I'm sure they were more than happy to take her in. Plus, she's even younger than me and she's got the rest of her life ahead of her. Between the degree she already has and finally being Greg-free, I'm sure she'll be more than fine. Well, the same can't be said for Greg. Maybe he'll find a job eventually. Though that'll be significantly harder in the middle of nowhere where Aunt Jasmine lives than here in a nice big city. Anyways, that's it. See ya.